The sky echoed with war cries. Swords clashed against shields, and blood soaked the earth. The Vikings had not come to negotiate. But what was their purpose? Why did they attack? This is a story of conflict, of blood, of a battle unlike any other in history. What really happened? Beneath towering green cliffs, a winding channel flowed. A native warrior drifted along the water, paddling a canoe built for 3. But the 8 companions who had set out with him had been captured by pale-skinned, bearded men wielding gleaming weapons and shining shields. As he reached the shore, he brought news of the ambush to his village and swiftly gathered a band of warriors to strike back. These were the native inhabitants of this land, descendants of those who had long ago abandoned the vast Eurasian plains, crossed primordial seas, faced mammoth-filled wildernesses, and finally settled deep within an untouched world. To them, the pale-skinned men with shining weapons were neither gods nor demons, just invaders, no different from rival tribes that had threatened their lands before, but these newcomers wielded iron, something unseen in their world. Would they bring fortune or destruction? The answer came swiftly, in the form of blood and fire. As ages passed, the bridge that once linked the 2 hemispheres crumbled, and each half of the world drifted apart for thousands of years. Then, the arrival of the Vikings from the north shattered that ancient divide. Thorvald Erikson, after ordering the execution of 8 native prisoners, did not foresee the storm of retaliation that would follow. Before long, from beyond the horizon, a fleet of dugout canoes emerged. Native warriors armed with bows, spears, and stone maces rushed forward like a relentless tide. Sensing the danger, the Vikings retreated to their ship. They raised their shields, forming a defensive wall against the incoming rain of arrows. The clash of weapons echoed as arrows pierced wood, shields, and, at times, even the iron armor of the Norsemen. The battle was fierce, but the natives had no intention of engaging in a prolonged fight. They struck with speed and precision before withdrawing, leaving destruction and casualties in their wake. Amidst the chaos, an arrow found its mark, striking Thorvald in the stomach. At first, he remained standing, gripping his sword tightly as if sheer willpower could hold him upright. But the pain soon became unbearable. His comrades rushed to his side, pressing rough cloth to the wound and dousing it with seawater in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. Yet it was too deep, unstoppable. Blood seeped through his tunic, staining the linen a deep, final red. As the pain deepened, Thorvald clutched his wound, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked out over the shore, where the waves crashed against the land they had fought so hard to claim. Was it regret he felt? Or had he always known this land would never be theirs? With a voice strained but unwavering, he gave his final wish: "Bury me here, with 2 crosses at my head and my feet." It was his last request, perhaps a testament to his Christian faith, or a way to mark Viking presence on this land. His comrades honored his words, digging a grave along the shores of Vinland and placing 2 crosses as he had wished. Thorvald Erikson became one of the first Vikings to perish on the North American continent, marking a violent and uncertain chapter in the long history of encounters between Europeans and the indigenous peoples of the land. The following spring, the surviving Vikings returned to Greenland, but before long the shores stirred once more. Dragon-headed ships sailed into the new land. Thorfinn Karlsefni, an ambitious explorer, led 70 settlers, both Christians and pagans. As if it were a sign from the gods, a stranded whale washed ashore, providing enough sustenance to endure the harsh winter. When spring arrived, from the depths of the forest, the natives appeared once more. At first, they were wary of the Vikings' cattle, but soon they cautiously approached. They unwrapped thick bundles of furs and pointed at the Northmen's iron weapons. Karlsefni refused to trade weapons, offering cow's milk instead. The natives, intrigued by the unfamiliar taste, eagerly exchanged their furs for the drink. And then, just as suddenly as they had come, they vanished into the trees. Fearing an uncertain future, Karlsefni ordered the construction of defensive walls around the settlement. The following autumn, they returned. This time, the natives were no longer scattered groups of traders. They came in overwhelming numbers. Yet, instead of launching an immediate attack, they remained at the edge of the settlement, watching from a distance, leaving strange markings on the ground before melting back into the forest. A sense of unease settled over the camp. Karlsefni felt the threat looming. He increased patrols, reinforced the barricades, and erected watchtowers. The Vikings kept their weapons within reach, even in sleep. But no matter how vigilant they were, they could not prevent what was coming. On the third night, fire erupted. Screams tore through the darkness. A band of native warriors had slipped in from downwind, using the cover of night and fog to approach undetected. Arrows whistled through the air, their flames casting eerie shadows on the painted faces of the attackers, ghostly specters of vengeance. "Hold the line," Karlsefni roared, parrying a spear thrust with his sword. The Vikings pressed together, backs against one another, forming an unyielding shield wall. But the enemy did not charge head-on. They moved through the trees, disappearing and reappearing from unexpected angles, as if the forest itself was their ally. A horn blast shattered the night, the signal for an all-out assault. This time, the attack came from multiple directions at once. From the riverbank, dugout canoes glided silently across the water, slipping toward the settlement like phantoms. They were surrounded. The Vikings held their ground, but they could not endure for long. A warrior collapsed, blood gushing from his throat, pierced clean through. Karlsefni realized he had fallen into a perfect trap, the forest behind them. The water ahead, there was no escape. The native warriors tightened their circle. Karlsefni knew that if they remained in place, they would be annihilated. "Retreat to the ships," he ordered. The Vikings fought their way back, abandoning their goods, leaving behind everything they had once hoped to build on this land. On the shore, a wounded warrior stretched out his hand, pleading for help, but they could not go back. Under a rain of arrows, the dragon-headed ships drifted silently away, carrying the defeated with them. Behind them, Vinland burned. The triumphant cries of the victors echoed through the wind, a resounding declaration: this was not Norse land. It had never been theirs. This story is recorded in the Saga of the Greenlanders, one of two Icelandic sagas recounting the journeys of Leif Erikson and the Viking expeditions to the lands they called Markland, Helluland, and Vinland. The saga of Eric the Red, the other version, presents significant differences. It merges the expeditions of Thorvald and Karlsefni into one, describing a bloody battle in which the Vikings were nearly wiped out, only to be saved by the sheer ferocity of a woman named Freydis. In the saga, Freydis tore off her armor, struck her bare chest with a sword, and let out a beastly roar so terrifying that the enemy fled in fear. Both sagas are products of folklore, recorded in the early 13th century. Their stories weave history with myth visions of ghosts foretelling the future, unseen voices guiding explorers. In the saga of Eric the Red, Thorvald does not die from a mere arrow, but from a bizarre, one-legged creature that shoots him straight in the groin. These stories are remnants of a fading era, as Viking clans united into kingdoms. As Scandinavian settlements in Greenland were gradually abandoned, the legends of a distant western land faded into the ashes of time, surviving only as fireside tales and rumors whispered by wandering merchants. Around the year 1340, an Italian friar recorded what he had heard of Markland. Far to the west lies a land called Markolada, where giants dwell. There, great buildings stand, built of massive stone slabs, so heavy that none but giants could have raised them. Yet no sailor has ever been certain of this place. By 1492, as the Vatican noted that no news had come from Greenland for 80 years, the land at the edge of the world, Christopher Columbus set foot in the Bahamas. European scholars began to question whether the Vikings had truly reached North America. Then, in 1960, at Newfoundland, archaeologists uncovered the remains of earthen dwellings, a blacksmith's forge, and carved wooden fragments, artifacts precisely dated to the year 1021. Perhaps, in the 11th century, the Vikings really had set foot on North American soil, traded with the natives, and possibly even explored as far south as Maine or New York. Yet after only a few years, they abandoned their colony, retreating quietly, leaving behind an unsolved mystery. Armed with iron axes and swords, the Vikings may have encountered the ancestors of the Beothuk or Dorset peoples, fierce indigenous warriors who might have sounded the death knell for their expansionist ambitions. As the saga of Eric the Red states, the land was rich and fertile, but they could not live there safely or without fear. And so, they made ready to leave, returning